In conversation with Teri M Brown. Born in Athens, Greece as an Air Force brat, Teri M. Brown came into this world with an imagination full of stories to tell. She now calls the North Carolina coast home, and the peaceful nature of the sea has been a great source of inspiration for creativity. Not letting 2020 get the best of her, Cherish chose to go on an adventure that changed her outlook on life. She and her husband, Bruce, rode on tandem bicycle across the United States from Astoria, Oregon to Washington, D.C., successfully raising money for Toys for Tots. She learned she's stronger than she realized and capable of anything she set her mind to. Fairy is a wife, mother, grandmother, and author who loves word games, reading, booming on the beach, taking photos, singing in the shower, hunting for bargains, ballroom, dancing, playing bridge, and mentoring others. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to have on the show today, Teri M. Brown. How are you doing, Terry?
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Quite lovely. We can do this.
So too.
Yeah, quite lovely. Thank you so much for coming on. And now, Terry, your novel, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, follows through the story of Megan McCory, who is a generational healer and relies on, family tradition, folklores, and beliefs gleaned from a local Cherokee tribe. And the clutch with her scientific daughter, Carrie Ann, and Josie Meyer, as they all strive to bring medical care to a mountain community in the late 80s. While I find the description of the book to be so compelling and captivating, I would like to ask you how you came about it. What inspired you to write Daughters of Green Mountain Gap? And why did you decide to write about Appalachian healers? I think I got cut a whole lot of question in there already.
Okay. So it's it's a wonderful story about these healers in the mountains. But
Mm.
how I came up with the idea is completely, it's very crazy. I had a wart on my thumb. So
Wow.
just a little wart on my thumb. I went to my doctor for just a regular checkup, and I
Yeah.
asked her if she could get rid of it for me. And she said, "Oh no, she would have to
Wow.
send me to a specialist." And I got a little irritated with that. And I was talking to my brother, and he said, "Why didn't you get somebody to talk it off?" And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I thought he was
Mm.
crazy. So after our phone call, I looked it up and found out that there are people who will talk to a wart and it will fall away. And then
Wow.
as I did more research, I found out that there were people who had these crazy healing abilities, that they were able to do things that didn't seem normal or real, that they seemed
Mm.
to have a little bit of magic to them somehow. And
Wow.
immediately I had a character in my head start talking to me. Her name was Maggie, and she was like, let's do this." And so as I was doing more research, I found out about healers in the Appalachian Mountains.
Wow.
They were known as granny women, and Maggie just kind of was born. And then I said, "Okay, well now I know that I've got a healer. What do I want to have happen?" And
Mm.
so I set it in the 1890s in the mountains of North Carolina,
Mm.
because at that time the mountains were very secluded
Mm.
from from everything.
Wow.
Civilization hadn't really, there were no big roads that came through. There were no big cities. And so they were living in a time that they didn't have a lot of progress.
Mm.
And Maggie is someone who is doing things the old way, and her daughter has the opportunity to go get some actual education in a big city. And
Wow.
she comes home and tries to bring new modern medicine to
Mm.
the area, and that causes a conflict between the mother and daughter. And then the granddaughter doesn't know which way to turn. She wants to
Oh.
heal as well, but she sees
Oh,
what her grandmother does and she likes it, and she sees what her mother does and she likes
oh,
it. And she
interesting.
also recognizes that neither one of them have all the answers, because
Oh,
even her mother, who went off to school, still has patients who don't make it. And so she's saying, well, what is the real answer? So it's that's kind of the gist of the story.
wow. Wow, I love the sound of this really. It sounds quite captivating and quite lovely to me. And mention the fact that we have some healers in there. Also, pique my interest because it sounds quite lovely to hear. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
And now I'd like to ask you, would you like to tell us about your award-winning novel, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow? And sorry, I would have loved you to show a copy of the first book to the camera, just so people can see what it looks like. Yeah, beautiful. Daughters of
Oh,
Green
yeah.
Mountain Gap. Beautiful cover. Thank you. Now, would you like to tell us
Thank you.
about your award-winning novel, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow? For readers who haven't read that yet, and of course, without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what to expect in terms of themes, picking up some flowers beneath the snow?
So Sunflowers Beneath the Snow is about three generations of Ukrainian women. What is very just crazy timing is this book
Wow.
came out 1 month before Russia invaded Ukraine. So the fact that I chose a topic like Ukraine to talk about is really, really interesting. I have
Wow.
a Ukrainian friend who told me an incredible story. It was so compelling that I tell everyone I wrote 82,000 words of fiction so I could tell 3 pages of truth. And the last 3 pages of the last chapter are true, but everything else is me making stuff up to get to that point. And the
Wow.
book really looks at things like xenophobia, like how do we can we accept people who are different than us?
Yeah.
And yeah, and like fitting in, and how do you move to someplace new and make yourself fit in? And then
Mm.
family relationships. My books
Yeah.
often focus on family relationships.
Interesting. I love the sound of that. Thank you so much for sharing. And now, part of the amazing works you've got out there is An Enemy Like Me, and I would love to commend your interesting and captivating bodies of works. I know it's quite a lot of work for authors to sit and writing all of these novels together. Yeah, part of your amazing works you've got is An Enemy Like Me, and I love that actually for a title, which I found the description of it to be so captivating as well on Amazon. Now, without giving much away, would you like to tell us a bit about the making of An Enemy Like Me? Plus, that's such a compelling title, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, so An Enemy Like Me follows a soldier. His name is Jacob.
Yeah.
He is an American, but he's a first generation American. So his parents were born in Germany and he was born in the United States. When World War II breaks out and he
Mm,
feels compelled to join the army and fight for his country, he believes he's going to fight the Japanese. And he
yeah.
ends up instead in Germany, where he realizes he's more like the enemy than he is different from the enemy. So we
Oh.
follow this journey of him going to war through his eyes, but also from his wife and his 4-year-old son who's left behind.
Mm. Wow. I love the sound of that. And please, if you have an example there, could you show it to the camera? Cover. I don't know how you came about this cover. Sounds quite lovely to me.
Well, if you look, this
Yeah.
soldier here, he is an American soldier. But if you look in the reflection, that's actually a German soldier.
Oh.
And what I'm saying is that he realizes that there isn't a lot separating him from his enemies in terms of what they believe, or
Mm.
how they think, or even like the language that they speak.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I really want people to think about when they're reading that book is,
Mm.
you know, is there a need for enemies? What
Mm.
what makes what makes an enemy? You
Mm.
know,
Wow.
do we need those in our life?
Mm.
And maybe we do need them in war, like, that's what military does, but do we need them in our personal lives?
Mm.
And, you know, wouldn't it be better to look for similarities and find ways to connect with people than to look for differences to find ways to separate us?
Wow. Your questions are quite philosophical.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
I can go on and on with that. Sounds quite philosophical to me. Thank you.
You're
Sounds quite
welcome.
amazing. Oh, Terry, I've always been fascinated about how authors, especially novelists like yourself, craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that it eventually makes a great novel. This always leaves me thinking about how exactly they got their ideas and inspiration. Now, as far as writing is concerned, I would also love to ask you too. How do you get the inspiration and ideas for your books? Where did they come from?
So mine come from everyday life. They just come from things that are just happening. And
Hmm,
I usually see something and then I start asking a question like, why? Or what if,
inquisitive.
what if this happened instead? Or what if that happened at a different period of time?
Hmm,
So for Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, that was a story that someone told me. It was a true piece of her history. It was just a little tidbit, and
hmm,
it was fascinating. And I started to think, how could that ever have come about?
hmm.
How could you ever end up with that? And so I just created a story to do that. In An Enemy Like Me, that
Yeah.
came about from something my grandfather told me 45 years ago.
Wow.
He was talking, he was in the war in World War II, and he
Oh.
fought in Germany. And my family is of German heritage, although we had lived in the United States for almost 200 years at the point that
Wow.
yes, so I mean we've been Americans for a long time. And even then, when my grandfather was in the war, he said to me, I always wondered if the person on the other side of my gun was a cousin.
Hmm.
And that really struck with me,
Hmm.
and it stayed in my mind. And so when it was time to write a book, that came up.
Hmm.
For this book, for Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, it was that wart that I had on my thumb that just made me start, thinking about things, and that thing that my brother said to me. Um, I've
Wow.
started a manuscript. I don't know that it will go anywhere at this point, but I started a manuscript because of a song I heard on the radio that said one more minute. And my thought was, I wonder what you would do if you knew you only had one more minute or an
Hmm.
hour or a day or a month. What would you do with that time? And it just started me thinking. So
Hmm.
I had an idea for a book one time walking along the beach, and I picked up a shell. And immediately I thought, wouldn't that be cool if instead of a shell, it was a message in a bottle?
Hmm.
And then I thought, well, what would the message say? And the thought came to me, it would say, everything you know isn't the truth. It isn't what you think it is.
Hmm.
And then my mind just started racing with ideas. So I,
Wow.
I don't know. I get ideas from the dumbest things.
Hmm. I get ideas from the dumbest thing. That sounds quite lovely, really. And I love your curiosity, your inquisitiveness. And I think that's one trait about writers that got them to be able to form something out of nothing. And again, from
Mhm.
your answer there, I'd love to pick this up. This question just came to my mind concerning the story of your grandfather and looking
Right.
back to the novel, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, which a bit of a theme of war. Is there any sort of, fiction, or is there any sort of reality from, the experiences your grandfather had together with what you have incorporated in the book? Do you have any of
Right.
that ongoing in there?
Yes. So the thing for my grandfather went with An Enemy Like Me.
Yeah.
And An Enemy Like Me actually is it is not my family story, but there are family stories in it. And so I
Oh.
kind of took a little bit of reality and a lot of creative license and put that together to create this story that talks a lot about like what my dad went through as a small child when his father went off to war, and what my grandmother went through, and the things that my grandfather experienced. And it isn't their story, but it's kind of based on that. It's like things that they told me as I grew up kind
Wow.
of became like the skeleton that the rest of this story fit upon.
Mm. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, at least for answering. Thank you. Now, Terry, let's talk about criticism. As authors, we all have different ways of reacting to feedbacks and criticism of our works. And I'm curious to know if you experienced any criticism so far since the book has been published. Now, how do you react to negative reviews of your books if you've ever had one? What's your take on that?
Oh, yeah. I've had them, and there is a little piece of you that kind of cries, because nobody likes it when you put something out in the world and you want everyone to love it as much as you do. But I really realize that not every book is for every person.
Absolutely.
Not every reader is going to get the same thing from a book.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is look at the criticism and say, is there anything here that will help me be a better writer?
Mm.
And if
Oh.
if there's something I can take from that I can use in my next novel, something that will help me, then I take that with me. And if there
Mm.
isn't anything that will help me, and it's just an opinion of someone who didn't care for the book, I don't worry about it anymore.
Mm.
It's okay for them not to like that book. And my thought is if you don't like my books, find some that you do like. There are thousands of authors out there. Go find
Yeah.
that author that really make you, like, wow, and go read that because,
Mm.
reading is important. And
Absolutely.
reading my books is optional. So, if
Yeah.
you don't like mine, find another, right?
Great. I love your take. I love your take on criticism. Sounds quite, informative and a bit educative to me too. So thank you for sharing. And I'm curious to know if you experienced any challenges in the process of writing your books. If there is any, could you share with us what challenge it is and how you ultimately overcame it?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's always challenges to writing. There's,
Yeah.
there's writer's block and there's finding enough time and all of
Yeah.
those things. But I think the biggest challenge that I've had recently is that my husband is ill and he has cancer and it's
Oh.
requiring a lot of work on my end to take care of him. And that's not a complaint. That's just it's a fact. And in the past, I have always gone on a writer's retreat where I get like 2 weeks
Mm.
by myself and I just write and I write and I write until I have first draft out. And then I take time at home to fix that up and turn it into something that I can put out to the world. Well, with my husband ill, I can't leave for 2 weeks. So I'm having to learn how to make time within this crazy schedule of life that we have to write. And that has been one of the hardest things for me because it's so different from what I've always done. And
Mm.
so I'm having to carve out a little hour here and a little 2 hours there. And it makes it a little hard to keep the continuity of the story in my mind. Like
Oh.
what did I say last? Where was I? You
Yeah.
know, whereas if you sit down and you're going to just write and write and write and write and write for 2 weeks, the story is very fresh in your mind. But if you're
Mm.
writing an hour here and then 3 days later, 2 hours there, and then a
Yeah.
week later you get 5 hours, it's harder to keep that going. So I
Mm.
think that's probably my biggest challenge right now is just learning
Oh.
a new way to write,
Wow.
in terms of time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your challenges. Thank you for sharing, and how you ultimately overcame it. Thank you so much. And now, Terry, let's go back to Daughters of Green Mountain Gap. And I seem to love that book so much. Yeah, pardon me for always going back to it. Yeah,
That's
let's
no,
go
that's
back.
good. That's the new one out. We don't mind.
Oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, let's go back to Daughters of Green Mountain Gap and have a touch on its characterization, which is one of my most admirable features and component of storytelling. And I'd like to ask you, what was your favorite or who was a favorite character in Daughters of Green Mountain Gap? And again, sorry, do you have any characters that you love and hate as well?
Okay. So Maggie is probably the character that I understand the most.
Mm.
Even though she's closer to my age, I feel like we understand life in a similar way. And so she's the easiest one for me to feel close to.
Mm.
Josie May, I love because she wants to learn and she's very open-minded. Carrie Ann is very difficult to love. She is stubborn and she digs her heels in and she insists everything is her way. And because she's so hard to love, I think I
Mm.
love her most. I love her most because she needs it from me more than the other characters do. So I almost
Wow.
feel protective of her because she had a hard time. She's still suffering from that difficulty, and then it comes out in everything that she does.
Mm.
And you I just want people want to shake her. And I just want to hug her. I just want to hold her really close and tell her it's going to be okay. You just get through this and it'll be okay. So
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love hearing that. And now, please, would you like to read a short section of any of your titles to the audience?
sure.
This could be any of your books, and it could be a favorite line, or say a favorite paragraph, of even a favorite page. Would you like to do that?
Sure. I'm going to read out of Daughters of Green Mountain Gap.
Let's do this. Yeah.
And yeah, and this is the in the prologue, and it's in 1894. We're finding out about Maggie. She has gone off. She has decided that she isn't a good healer. She doesn't want to see anyone.
Wow.
She's going to be silent from this point forward. Um, Maggie determined to live out her days in the small cabin. She did not want room and ease in a large garden. She did not want a front porch for sipping lemonade or a kitchen table large enough for guests. She didn't want to be reminded of her family or the storeroom of herbs. She simply wanted to be left alone to atone for her sins.
Oh, sounds quite lovely, really. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, actually.
Yeah.
And that's so short. Thank you for
Well, you,
sharing.
you said a paragraph or so, so that was
Yeah,
a
I
paragraph.
was thinking
I
you can
could have
actually
I
go
could have
much
read the whole
farther.
prologue if you wanted me to.
Thank you for reading. Thank you for reading.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Terry. And now, in case we have some, interested viewers who are currently watching this interview and would like to get a copy of any of your books, on what platform are they available on for purchase?
All right. So you can find them on Amazon. Definitely. You can find them on Barnes and Noble.
Mm.
If you are in the United States, you can order them from my website, which is my name,
Uh,
terrymmbrown.com, and that's Terry with one R. Um, let's see where else. I mean, pretty much wherever books are sold, you should be able to find it. You can get it on Kindle and in paper.
Yeah, great. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of any of Terry Brown's books directly on Amazon and also on other platform. So thank you so much, Terry, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
I have really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you too.